All right, so we've got a really interesting dilemma here today.
Yeah.
Kesser and Steen sent this in, and basically, it seems like in Denmark, toads have this, like, protected status, right? They're on Appendix 4, but then...
Yeah, they're on the Appendix 4 list.
In Australia.
Yeah.
They're having these big events to
get rid of them. Yeah.
To bust them.
To bust the toads.
Yeah.
So what is the story there?
Well, it's a great example of the difference between native species and invasive species.
Oh, okay.
You see, in Denmark, toads are a natural part of the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
They've always been there, and the environment is in balance with them around.
Well, they're kind of playing by the rules of the habitat that they're in.
Yes, exactly. But what's happened in Australia is a classic example of what can go wrong when a species is introduced to an environment where it doesn't belong.
Okay, so this is the cane toad.
This is the cane toad.
And so let's rewind the clock back to like 1935.
Yeah.
What was the thinking there? Well, Australia was having a major problem with cane beetles that were wreaking havoc on their sugarcane crops.
Okay.
And somebody thought they had a brilliant idea: introduce cane toads from Hawaii to control these beetles.
Okay.
Like, hey, toads eat bugs, problem solved.
Makes sense on the surface.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a crucial detail they overlooked.
Okay.
They didn't actually check to see if cane toads like to eat these particular beetles.
Oh, so they laid out this buffet and the toads were like, nah, we're good.
Pretty much. And to make matters worse, these cane toads were incredibly adaptable, thrived in the Australian climate, had no natural predators, and started breeding a lot.
Okay, how much is a lot when we're talking about cane toads?
So a single female cane toad can lay up to 35,000 eggs at a time.
Wow.
It's an amphibian explosion.
35,000.
35,000 eggs.
Kesser and Steen, can you even imagine that many toad eggs?
It's a lot.
So obviously this is going to become a problem.
It did.
Okay.
And with nothing to keep their population in check, these cane toads started spreading like wildfire across the continent.
So not only are they not doing their job, they're also exploding in population and kind of taking over the place.
Yeah.
This is starting to sound like a ecological disaster movie.
It kind of is, and it gets worse.
Oh, no.
These cane toads, they aren't just harmlessly hopping around, they're actually poisonous.
Okay, poisonous, like touch it and you get warts, or like serious poisonous?
More on the serious side, unfortunately.
Okay.
Their skin secretes toxins that are deadly to a lot of the native predators.
Oh, wow.
Goannas, crocodiles, snakes. They try to eat a cane toad thinking it's an easy meal, and they end up paying the ultimate price.
So not only are they taking over, they're also wiping out the wildlife.
It's a domino effect.
Mm.
The cane toads outcompete native species for resources. They poison the ones that try to eat them, and their sheer numbers just disrupt the balance of the entire ecosystem.
But I'm really glad that back in Denmark, we have these Appendix 4 protections in place for the toads.
Yeah.
It just shows how delicate that balance is.
It does. Introducing a species to a new environment can have far-reaching and totally unintended consequences.
Okay.
It's like throwing a wrench into this finely tuned machine.
Yeah, it seems like this wrench is causing a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about how the arrival of the cane toad kind of went from this well-intentioned solution to this big ecological crisis.
Yep.
But I think we need to get into some more specifics of how these toads are actually impacting the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's definitely something we need to dive into further to fully understand the extent of this problem.
Okay.
So Kesser and Steen, we were talking about how this cane toad invasion kind of started with this like well-intentioned but ultimately disastrous plan.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to get into like the specifics of the impacts these toads are having on the Australian ecosystem.
Yeah, let's unpack those details.
Okay.
Like, we know that they're poisonous and they're outcompeting the native species.
Right.
But what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, you got to imagine like a food web, right? This complex network of interconnected species all relying on each other for survival.
Yeah.
The cane toad is like throwing this wrench in the gears.
So I'm picturing this web, and then suddenly this like big bumpy toad just kind of lands right in the middle of it.
Exactly. And these toads are like eating machines.
Oh, no.
You're consuming a huge variety of insects, small reptiles, mammals, even birds.
Wait, toads are eating birds?
Yeah, they're opportunistic predators. I mean, they'll gobble up anything they can fit in their mouths.
So they're not just outcompeting native species for food, they're actually like preying on them directly.
Exactly. And as they spread, their impact is just rippling throughout the whole ecosystem.
Oh, wow.
Native frog populations are declining. Insect populations are just decimated, and even the populations of predators like quolls and goannas are suffering.
It's like this chain reaction of negative consequences.
It really is, and then their poisonous skin just makes the whole thing worse.
Right.
Predators that haven't learned to avoid them, they often die after trying to eat them.
So it's like a double whammy for the native species.
Yeah, they're losing their food, and they're getting poisoned by these toads.
Yeah.
And this brings us to this other interesting phenomenon scientists are calling the Olympic Village effect.
Okay, the Olympics. What do the Olympics have to do with toads?
Well, think about it like this. In the Olympics, only the fastest and the strongest athletes make it to the finals, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, with cane toads, the fastest and strongest are the ones that are reaching the front lines of the invasion first.
Oh, so they're like the pioneering toads leading the charge.
Exactly. And because they're the first ones there, they're the ones that are breeding and passing on their genes.
So are you saying that the cane toads are evolving to become even better invaders?
In a way, yeah. The offspring of these pioneer toads, they inherit those traits that made their parents successful invaders, like the speed and the strength.
Okay.
And this leads to a generation of toads that are even faster spreading and more resilient.
So they're just upping their game all the time, becoming more of a threat.
It's kind of the reality, and it's one of the reasons why controlling this invasion has been such a huge challenge.
So it sounds like a pretty dire situation. I mean, are there any signs of hope here?
It's a complicated issue.
Yeah.
There's no easy solutions, but Australians are not giving up.
Okay.
They've implemented a whole bunch of different strategies, from community-led toad-busting events to scientific research into potential control methods.
So there's like a huge effort going into trying to manage this problem.
Absolutely. And while complete eradication might be unlikely, there is hope that these efforts can at least mitigate the damage and help protect Australia's unique ecosystems.
Okay, so we've talked about how these toads are wreaking havoc, but I mean, is there anything positive about them at all?
That's an interesting question. And surprisingly, there might be some potential benefits to be found in these toads.
Like what?
Specifically in their venom.
Wait, are you saying there's a possibility that the very thing that makes these toads so dangerous could also be used for good?
It sounds counterintuitive, but yeah, there's some promising research being done on the potential uses of cane toad venom.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Kesser and Steen. What do you think they could possibly use this venom for?
Well, researchers are looking into the potential of this venom for things like painkillers, antibiotics, even cancer treatments.
Really?
Yeah.
So this poison that's killing native animals in Australia could potentially be used to develop life-saving medicines.
It's still early days in the research, but there are some really exciting possibilities, and it's not just medicine either.
No.
Cane toad venom could also be used to develop more targeted and environmentally friendly pesticides.
So instead of using broad-spectrum pesticides that can harm beneficial insects,
Yeah.
we could have something that specifically targets the pests we want to get rid of.
Exactly. It's about harnessing the power of nature in a more sustainable and responsible way.
Okay, this is fascinating. It's like turning a villain into a hero. But how would they extract the venom? Do they have to milk the toads or something?
That's a funny image. Well, there are traditional methods of extracting venom that involve stimulating the glands.
Okay.
But there's also a lot of research being done on synthetically producing the venom in labs.
So we could have all the benefits of the venom without any of the downsides of the toads themselves.
Exactly. It's just a really fascinating example of how science and innovation can help us find solutions to complex problems.
This is really promising, but are there any risks associated with using this cane toad venom? I mean, it is a pretty potent toxin.
That's a really important point, and any potential use of cane toad venom would need to be rigorously tested and regulated to ensure its safety and efficacy. And of course, we're talking about a controlled environment,
right?
Not unleashing more toads into the wild.
Of course. But if we can find a way to safely and responsibly utilize this venom, it could have huge implications.
Yeah.
I mean, for medicine, agriculture, the environment.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of scientists who are constantly seeking solutions to even the most daunting challenges.
This whole deep dive has been such a roller coaster so far.
Yeah.
I mean, from the depths of despair at this cane toad invasion to the potential for life-saving medicines.
It's a complex issue with so many layers, but one thing's for sure, the cane toad invasion has had a profound impact on Australia, both ecologically and culturally.
Yeah, and speaking of the cultural impact, I'm really curious to know, how are Australians, the people who live alongside these toads every day, how are they coping with this invasion?
That's a great question, and that's something we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll take a closer look at the human element of this story and how Australians are adapting to life with these bumpy invaders.
Okay, so Kesser and Steen, like, we've been talking about the science and the ecological impacts of this cane toad invasion.
Yeah.
But I want to hear more about the people, like, how are everyday Australians the ones who are actually living with these toads?
Yeah.
How are they dealing with this?
It's one thing to read about an invasive species in a textbook, right? But it's a totally different experience when you're living with it, like, day in and day out.
Yeah.
For a lot of Australians, especially the ones in those heavily affected areas, cane toads are just this constant source of frustration and even fear.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it must be kind of unsettling knowing that these poisonous creatures are just hopping around your neighborhood.
Absolutely. It's not unusual for people to find toads in their gardens, their swimming pools, even inside their homes.
Ugh, okay, I'm not going to think about that.
Yeah, and for pet owners, it's a huge worry.
Yeah?
Especially dogs. They're curious, right? They might try to play with a toad or sniff it, not knowing the danger.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, it adds this whole other layer of concern to the situation.
Right.
But what's amazing is how resilient Australians are.
Yeah.
They've faced so many challenges throughout their history, and they're tackling this toad invasion head on.
So we talked about the great cane toad bust, but are there other things that people are doing, like at a more local level?
Oh, yeah. Tons of communities have formed these toad-busting groups.
All right.
And they organize these, regular patrols to remove toads from parks, gardens, neighborhoods.
So it's like this community effort, people coming together to protect their local areas?
Exactly. It gives people a way to take action.
Yeah.
To feel like they're making a difference in this, overwhelming situation. And some communities are getting really creative.
Okay, how creative are we talking here?
Yeah.
What can you possibly do with a poisonous toad?
Well, some people have figured out ways to use them as fertilizer.
Really?
Yeah, they're surprisingly nitrogen-rich.
Huh.
And in some cases, they've even been used as a source of protein for animal feed.
Wow, so they're really thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
I mean, turning this problem into something potentially useful.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
It's inspiring to see people not just reacting to this problem, but actively trying to find ways to turn it into something positive.
Yeah, it shows the human spirit, our ability to adapt and find solutions even when things are tough.
It really does.
So Kesser and Steen, it sounds like this cane toad invasion is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
But it's also a story about resilience, about community action.
Yep.
And innovation.
For sure. It shows just how important it is to understand that balance of nature.
Yeah.
And the potential consequences when we as humans interfere with that.
It's like a reminder that even those seemingly small actions can have this ripple effect throughout an entire ecosystem.
Exactly. And while there's no easy fix, it's really encouraging to see people coming together to protect their environment and find creative solutions to this really complex problem.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
We've explored the science, the ecological impacts, and even the human side of this whole thing. It's been fascinating.
It has been a really interesting story.
So Kesser and Steen, thanks for sending this in, and thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cane toads.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.